I would like to start with a very brief introduction of the exhibition itself, so that those visitors or those who join us tonight, that they get a clear idea what we are actually talking about. And I prepared a very small PowerPoint presentation so that you could see the exhibition, and I would ask Reimer and Andreas to maybe give comments. Maybe they can just switch so that everyone says just a few words about the artist that you see. So are the slides there?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, cool. Maybe already the second slide would be fine. Yeah, I just brought one slide that gives you an idea where the exhibition is situated, and maybe Reimer or Andreas, you can explain a little bit about the site itself.
Yes, so the site that is quite nicely visible here on the satellite image. It is basically the extension of the Baltic Sea, which runs upwards into the north and splits Finland and Sweden. It's one of the only places that is usually frozen in the Arctic winter. The exhibition site would be very close to the very top of the Bay of Bothnia that you can clearly see sitting right in the middle of the image, of the satellite image. And there at the very top to the left, you would find Sweden, to the right would be Finland. And the exhibition was realized there at the very top. The closest town, half an hour away by snowmobile, would be Luleå.
Okay, next slide then.
Now you see 3 pieces there, but it's not really clearly to see. It's one piece by John. No, you see 4 pieces. Left-hand side is Jonathan Monk. In the back you see Peter Niemann, a suit by Joseph Beuys. Then you see Veit Schütz, really on the right-hand side. And in the middle, what's the name, Andreas?
In the middle is that dark element you can see is Nika Fontaine's work. And to the very right-hand side, that must be the work of Veit Schütz.
Yeah. Okay, next slide. Yes.
So here we have a close-up of the work of Nika Fontaine. It is an instructional piece with a certain ritualistic aspect. So as you can see, when you look closely at the slide, you see those baked skulls, which are also giving the name to this work called Bread of Shame. And also there are a few stone blocks with charcoal sitting on top, which had to be lit. And there was an incense placed on top of the charcoal and a letter to be written, which can also be found written by me on the website.
Cool. Next slide. It's again a close-up of the bread skulls.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a piece by Nadira Hussain. It's a Berlin-based artist. She's half, in quotation marks, half French, half Indian. And what you see is a turtle you can buy in a normal shop, and then she colored it as light blue and light. And that's the 2 references that are important. I said she's French and she's Indian, in quotation marks. So light blue because of the Smurfs, so the world of comic and the world of pop. And the turtle is I forget the name, it's an Indian god that has to protect the world. And she mixes together
Okay.
The photo
Next.
is a problem because of the light.
Okay. Yeah. Because everything's blue.
Yes.
That's a piece by Jonathan Monk, also Berlin-based artist from England. Ocean Wave was the name of the last sailing boat Jasper and Ada used on his last trip in the ocean. So in this way, it's a kind of combine a personal tragedy with a tragedy we will have in 30 years.
Next slide.
It's a piece by Olaf Nicolai. You see all the dishes he uses during one day. So it's a comment on consumer culture. And of course, consumer culture, our way of life, our way to consume, of course, is one reason for climate change. Because we consume too much, we consume not fair, we consume blah, blah, blah.
Okay, next.
There we see the work of Veit Schütz in the foreground. This is actually a replica. It was reproduced in an eco-friendly manner. The original had electronics in it. It resembles actually a radio housing from 1940s, I believe. And as soon as you would press the red button, there would ignite all kinds of red and green dots all across the slightly 3D printed globe that you might also be able to identify on the image. And in the back,
maybe the next image will show it better.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another
background.
image, a GIF. I hope it works. Maybe the next slide. No, the GIF doesn't work.
It worked, yes.
Yes, did it?
Yeah.
Then the next slide again.
So this is a piece by Peter Niemann. Of course, you recognize it's a legendary suite by Joseph Beuys, but now there's a Marlboro sticker on it. So what he reflects, it's a little bit the mixture of ecology activist and the Formula One driver. So it's about the mixture of advertising and climate justice and so on. So also what happens to the movement of the green and what happens to all this nature food and bio food and so on. Of course, it's most of it, it's not really bio food and it's a commodity in our capitalistic world. So that's what the piece is about.
Next one.
Here we see a gate, one of the two gates, which serve as sort of entry and exit gates, if you want so, to the exhibition, but also to mark the space, which is not ending there. And the work is by the Peruvian artist Eliana Otta, and it references the three scissor cuts you see blowing there in the wind. They reference a pilgrimage, which happens yearly in Cusco, up a mountain. In this ritual, the Chuchuluriti ritual, the shamans and pilgrims move up that mountain and return with ice that they bring down back into the valleys, and always at the appearance of the Pleiades constellation.
Well, next slide, please.
It's by Martha Rosler. You see a photo of the ex-Vice President from the United States. And he just introduced a new program for something in the, I don't get the English word.
Space Force.
Can you help me?
Yeah, Space Force.
So it's also about the hybris that the humankind wants to be the hero or the master of the universe and wants to rescue the world with technique and so on.
And it's eatable cake.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
It's a sheet cake, yeah.
Yeah.
Sheet cake.
Okay, thank you. Next, thank you.
And it's a work by Stephanie von Schröter. It's called Big Bone. It's kind of a hybrid of Memento Mori, and it's beautiful and it's cynical, and it also reflects like Peter Niemann before. That's also all this climate justice is also a commodity right now, and it's also part we can earn our money as art people with it, and that's a kind of beautiful art piece you can sell on the art market.
Mm. Next slide, please.
This is a work and a small greeting by the Russian-German artist Julia Strauss. The greeting that we see on top is a tetraptych. I hope I express it in the right manner. And a piece of ivy that you see below in the video, which was a recording that she made. It is of a 2,500-year-old song. Actually, it was supposed to be sung on the ice flue itself as ritual, but due to the difficult circumstances of curating this exhibition, this was not possible. So we have her here behind a green screen, which consciously was left green also.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. I think that was the last one, right?
I think that's
yeah, that was it. Okay, thank you. As I already said to the two curators, I have a bunch of questions, and I bundled them in 5 actually different chapters. One is about your collaboration, then about the artists, about the exhibition, about the theoretical background, and about the expected impact of the exhibition. So let me start with the first question, because I was really curious how your collaboration came about. I know that Reimer, you invited Andreas for your exhibition 2050, Naturmord, in the Kunstverein Rosa-Luxemburg-Platz in Berlin, which dealt with a similar topic, let's say, I was just curious how your collaboration actually came about. So, Reimer,
we met before in other exhibition I curated about feminism, and we have a common friend, and that's Julia Strauss, and so we get in contact and we talk about things and so on, and so it developed. And as you said, it was part of my show 2050 with the audio piece. And so he also is interested in the topic of climate change.
And Andreas, did you curate before?
Yes, I did in fact curate before. I used to also form an institution in Amsterdam in the early 2000 years. And was curating there for 2 years. Then also in the corporate sector for the last couple of years. And actually the idea evoked around the exhibition 2050 and discussing about the exhibition with Weimar. And there was a feeling of how could we even like step up the game? How can we be more concise? How can we even be more directly addressing the topic in a manner that also hurts a bit, so to say. And the hurting, of course, comes there, I think, when curating an exhibition and you compile all the artworks arrive in these times, they arrive at your house. So they literally sit in your house till the day of departure. And you get acquainted with them, you get used to them. Well, and then you install the exhibition and leave the artworks behind, in essence. Basically the opposite of curating, so to say, which of course has a custodial function of being the caretaker and protector of the artwork, which is, of course, in this concept jeopardized to a certain extent.
Mhm. And how did you come up with the idea of initiating an exhibition at this very location? Did you have any specific relation to that place?
Actually, not at all. We were on search for a location. In our proposal, we still outlined to have the exhibition on the Norwegian Sea. Then from summer onwards, going into more detailed planning with all the whereabouts of the exhibition, we got in contact with the Alfred Wegener Institute and some scientists there. It's the German Polar Institute, Arctic Institute. And well, we learned to our surprise that there isn't any ice on the Norwegian Sea anymore in wintertime. And that when we would really be looking for Arctic winter and an ice blue, then we should reside to the landlocked part of the Baltic Sea in Swedish Lapland, between Lapland and Finland. And yeah, so thank you for pointing us into the right direction.
And how did the cooperation with the local people then work out?
Well, actually, we were sort of scanning the internet, starting with such profane sites like TripAdvisor, Outdoor Adventures, etc., etc. And then, funnily enough, we ended up with a group of people who run an organization like that called Luleå Archipelago Adventures. And it's a really good team. They are all ex-military, one from the Australian Engineering Corps, the other one sergeant of the US Army. And when the first Zoom conferences started, because I mean, you have to be very considerate in such a hostile environment. You also don't want to get yourself killed, obviously. So you should better have someone there who knows all the ins and outs. And when I had the first Zoom calls with them, I was like, yes, okay, that's definitely the guys that we were looking for to realize this exhibition with. And it has been really a team effort. And it was really a very strong cooperation.
Did you both travel there?
No, I didn't go because I'm a little bit older and we have Corona and so on. The other point was we don't have money for 3 persons and we need one assistant who can make video and so on. So Andreas was a hero and Sean Smuda was the other hero and they made it.
Okay.
I was sitting at home and complaining. No, it's not.
Poor Reimer. and what was the temperature, Andreas? How cold was it?
We were lucky actually on the day that we chose for installing the artworks. We had 4 days there and a 2-day time window to install. And it was only -18 Celsius on that day. Already quite a challenge for 8 hours being out there on the sea, on the frozen sea. Luckily not a very strong wind chill, only from time to time. Just about 5 days later, the temperature dropped to -29 Celsius in daytime and -40 at night. And our window, also with following the advice from our hosts, was up to -25. It will be feasible to do it. Past 25 Celsius, we will have to completely overhaul our logistics plan. So maybe that you place a tent there, and like we had a open campfire there, so you could warm up, and you always used reindeer skin out there to to stand on, because it's a perfect scintillation actually. And yeah, that was quite manageable.
Mhm. Yeah, now I come to the second topic, the artists. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more how the selection of artists came about and what the criteria were when you selected the artists? I know that Reimer already worked with some of them in other exhibitions, but I would say there are some artists among them where I wouldn't think of the topic in the first place. So I'm really curious about the selection of artists. Reimer,
Yeah, we have different, of course you ask friends for, not only, but of course you ask a lot of friends, because it's a strange question to ask someone, bring us an art piece and we will destroy it, or the nature will destroy it. So that's why we ask, of course, work with a lot of friends. That's one point. There were artists who didn't even answer the email when we asked. That's one thing. The other thing is that we try to get something like, how to say, we have young artists, we have old artists. I think we have more female artists than male artists. We have indigenous artists. We have from different kinds of the world. That also was the plan, to have kind of a mirror of the world, because it's not a local problem. It's not of course it's an in situ exhibition in a way, but it's not an exhibition about the problem of Sweden. It's a problem of the world, of course. So that's why we want to have artists from all over the world, more or less. Of course, we don't have a budget that allowed us to ask too many artists, also because of transport costs and so on. And then the next, what we try is to have different aspects in the. As I said, we have consumer culture we have art historian references, we have kind of native knowledge in the exhibition, and everything okay? Hear me twice.
You look frozen, but now I think it's okay again.
That's enough to get different topics that are related to climate change.
And
which artist you don't expect in the show?
Yeah, like Veit Schütz, for example, he's a graphic designer, I think. So I was really astonished how you came to the conclusion to integrate him into the show.
Yes, I think that also has to do actually to open up the show to a certain extent. So Veit Schütz, he's as you said, he's actually an illustrator and graphic designer, mainly illustrator, and a lot of exhibitions they try to have the most prominent VIP list of artists that they pile up and then hope for the maximum of attention, because everyone goes like, oh, look at this list and which artists are participating in this exhibition. And actually it was an intentional choice in order to open up and say art does not, I think also some documenters tried that, for instance, when you integrate forensic architecture in the last documenter who played an important role there. To open up for other influences, which are not precisely located in the art world.
Same with Julia Strauss in a way. She's also very important as an activist. Peter Niemann is also a collector and an entrepreneur. So it's interesting not only to have this so-called professional artists.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then I was also asking myself how the different artists or collector artists, non-artists reacted to the idea that their work will disappear. So were there particular fears about that? Because I saw that Stefanie von Schröter's Painted Bone, it's already an older work from, I think, 2012. I found it on her website actually as a work that she presents on her website, and now it will disappear, right? How did the different artists react to that, and how did they relate to the question that the artwork will disappear?
It's different artists, and they react, of course, in a different way. And you are right that what I said about Stephanie von Schröter's piece, it's a commodity, of course, and that's why it hurts to her. Of course, she can't sell it anymore. It's the same with Nadira Hussein. The pieces from the PSM gallery in Berlin, and they can't sell it anymore. And also the piece by Peter Niemann, it's from the late 90s, I think. It's of course, but that makes sense. Otherwise, it don't hurt. And all artists, they get the point. And that's why they said, okay, we do that. It's a strong gesture, and we need this strong gesture right now.
I was surprised that there was not one moment of hesitation with all the artists that we asked. Although we also recognized with some artists that we try to work with, which are also represented by very big galleries, that there was a lot of hesitation, which also had to do in some cases with the contracts that the artists have with the gallery, and also very irritated reactions in regards to, so actually you want to devalue the art work that we are trying to sell, and that contradicts, and we recommend the artist not to participate. We also got such reactions, actually.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Some of the artists, such as Nika Fontaine and Julia Strauss, work with very spiritual and mystical and quasi-religious aspects in their work. And Olaf Nicolai's work reminded me on The Last Supper, for example. So, yeah, why not? It's an egoist Last Supper, you know? Not a Last Supper that you have in a collective with friends. I was wondering whether you maybe also discussed about this particular romanticism of the reaction of saying goodbye to the world in this kind of mystic and quasi-religious way. Was that important for you, or don't you see this aspect that much? I was really wondering what you think of this impression.
I don't think religious is okay, but for me it's more important. And for that I want to quote, I probably will pronounce her in the wrong way, sorry for that. I want to quote freely Maria Belén Sáez de Ibarra, and she wrote, "We have to create a seminal work of art whose content include not only the voices, wisdom, and specific history of the native peoples, but also the knowledge, present, and forces of all life forms there." So I think that's important for climate change. We can't continue with our anthropocentric way of thinking. We need new narratives. Like Michel Serres said, we need a new contract. And for this, we have to think about old native stories and their way to deal with nature. And for this was very important for us, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's kitsch. That is the typical logocentric way to think about, to say it's kitsch or it's romanticism. It's not.
Well, referring to the work of Olaf Nicolai, I also had this image in mind of the gentleman polar explorer who would come with like tons of material and 200 packs of there to transport his materials there. What I found really striking actually was that you find elements of grief there, especially in the work of Nika Fontaine. I think it expresses quite clearly. in a certain extent, also in the work of Eliana Otter and in the work of Julia Strauss. While Eliana Otter was inspired by this work as that ritual is not to be performed at its original location in Cusco due to the COVID crisis now in its second year. And it's a very important ritual there. To the point of the approach of Nika Fontaine, who wrote a personal letter and combined it with a ritualistic aspect. I think maybe what will remain from this exhibition, next to the commands that we experience, for instance, by Jonathan Monk, Martha Rosler, Peter Niemann, that actually everyone will have to find their own way of or a path of dealing and handling an overwhelming amount of climate grief that will become a stronger and stronger feeling and will gain momentum, which is also, by the way, that we decided to integrate a clinical psychologist on our panel upcoming on the 27th, who is actually doing research in the topic, on the topic of climate grief.
Mm-hmm. Harald Welzer, right? Yeah.
I know Professor Oyala from Örebro University.
Oh, okay, okay. I try to envision how the exhibition looks like now. If I would go there now, what will I see? Is there anything? Maybe assuming that it hasn't, that it wasn't snowing so far since the opening, would I see anything?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there is one topic about, there is a favorite pastime in that region of the world, which is like on a Saturday, Sunday, you get daddy's snowmobile and take your friends and girlfriend out for a ride. And especially the frozen sea is particularly interesting to the younger folks. So, I mean, the Swedish are very cultured, very polite. So I assume that no one would actually consciously choose the path of destroying the exhibition. But I think quite a few people will encounter it in that way, being out there, doing sports, etc. Then we might find a half-eaten cake of Martha Rosler. Maybe, maybe not even anything might remain of that cake. And we were already joking in another interview. There are also quite a few people living out there on that archipelago, kind of emerites, you could say, hermits who are very living by themselves and have their own ideas about life. And if someone would decide that this Peter Niemann Joseph Beuys suit is actually good to own, and would use it as a in the summer as a suit for Sunday or so, well, I think we would all appreciate that.
But it's important. It was a decision to don't have a webcam there,
Mm-hmm.
so we don't know that. So you have to imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's much more interesting than to know it.
And Andreas, because you are the only one who actually was there, how does what role does the landscape and the aesthetic of the landscape itself play for the exhibition? Does it kind of overwhelm the whole thing so that the art pieces are just very little tiny pieces in it? Or how was that? What influence does the aesthetic of the landscape have?
Well, of course, the landscape itself, it is endless. You could literally walk on in some years to Finland, which would be around 70 kilometers away. This year, because of the large amount of snow that fell, well, about 1 meter in a couple of days, and then some more, it wouldn't be possible, mainly because between the ice sheet, which would be already released to build a motorway on it to Finland, which happens most of the years, actually. There's an interesting National Geographic documentary about that as well, for anyone interested. But due to the amount of snow and the ice sheet, it becomes thin-insulated by the snow. And so a sort of ice slush of about 30 centimeters forms, making it very difficult to move around. So all of your movement is very limited, and you feel yourself very reduced to, yeah, that you would know, okay, maybe I could take a walk for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, but then I would be so exhausted that I've better been walking a circle and would have the land in sight somewhere. Actually, because of the snow moving around, which was an advantage, we found a really interesting topography. As you might have seen, we also played with the topography, in fact. So except for the snow pile that we formed for Nika Fontaine's work, I think, for instance, the work of Jonathan Monk, I was looking at that terrain and was immediately, well, the Jonathan Monk work goes there. So, and also I wanted to create an experience that you would really find an outdoor exhibition. So for the couple of visitors that this exhibition will see, as mentioned, there are people out there on the ice. The Swedish love their snowmobiles and love to go for rides. And so it is also a classical exhibition parkour, which you might also get an idea of when you actually look at the walkthrough on the website, that it is also installed as a classic exhibition parkour.
Mm-hmm. I'm also wondering about the theoretical background of your exhibition. And when I read the book The Ends of the World by Deborah Danofsky and Eduardo Viveiros de Castro, they distinguish between different concepts of the end of the world, like the end of the world without humankind, the end of the world with some leftover humankind. And I was wondering if you also had in mind to maybe collect different artists who approach in a different, or maybe say goodbye to the world in a different way. And think of different and distinguish different ends of the world. So was that one of the ideas, or was that not important for you? Also about the Anthropocene discourse, for example, how do you relate to the Anthropocene discourse, and or do you rather sympathize with Donna Haraway's Clutocene idea, having the concept of refuge spaces, seeing oneself as compost, for example. So that would be my question. Did you discuss these theoretical concepts?
To be honest, not really. So it's also not important for the show. As we mentioned before, I did last year the show 2050, and that refers to some Australian, I think it was Australian scientists said 2050 there will be no human life on Earth anymore. So that's why the name of the show was 2050. So it's, Andreas is not so pessimistic as I am, but for the show this was not really important. We said there will be end of the world. We don't know when. Maybe it's the end of the century, maybe it's 2050. But you mentioned so many names, I'm more to REM, the end, and we know as we know it.
Yeah,
Um,
Andreas?
Actually, in the review by Anja Schwensky at 4 Columns, she quoted the Icelandic author Sion, who wrote in a book, "The Arctic used to be the end of the world. Now it's disappearing, and maybe the world will end with it," which I find a quite remarkable quote. I think in a way, Reimer and me had a discussion on that topic, especially in the essay that we wrote accompanying this exhibition, and that we treated as a fragment relating to the literature discipline of the tradition of the fragment in the 1900 Romantic literature. Also, I think with very different approaches of looking at the subject. I think we both strongly agree that that this attitude of tech solutionism that we get offered, well, actually, we're just going to find a method to contain the CO2 and repress it into bricks or put it into the ground again, etc., etc. That this is actually not the path forward. I think the return to an understanding of an animated nature, and that we are not just being able to overpower our footprint continuously. I believe in Europe and in the United States, we overpower our footprint of what we would actually be allowed to use by 25 to about 34 times, and that on a constant. And I think there definitely needs to be some reconciliation there in that part, absolutely. Also the question of Bruno Latour, where do we stand before, during, or after the apocalypse that I've been opening the essay with. I think that is also an interesting question to ask anyone that you know and start a discussion about that. I think it is really a key sentence to open up a discussion, and how people would answer this question actually tell a lot about their perception of the direction we are heading in, or where do we actually locate ourselves and what is happening and going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think does this exhibition contribute to the whole discourse about the climate collapse? What contribution do you do you hope for?
Well, I think I would like to see a reaction of that people identify their own way of method of approaching the subject for themselves, that the artists might help to inspire them to show the different methods and paths that might be there to approach that subject. And in regards to the media attention this exhibition is getting, I think it really would be nice if we could have people there as readers, recipients, interested in art, with a feeling of, oh no, it's already happening. So maybe I have to change my whole approach of evaluating and thinking about it. As we provocatively already wave goodbye, go to the last stage of the process of mourning, which Kübler-Ross described in her research as the phase of acceptance, as the last phase of mourning. And of course, there is a provocation within of saying, okay, folks, it's happening. We will not stop at the 2 degrees Celsius, not even also the climate agreement, Paris Agreement. All the goals are we're already past that. and it's time to buckle up, actually.
Yeah, one last question, and then I would like to hand over to the other participants in this discussion. My last question would be, since your exhibition has been selected out of a number of applications, hundreds of applications, yeah, I think it also has something groundbreaking in it. And maybe you also had this approach to change the art world itself, because you thought of the art market and to maybe undermine the way how the art market works by destroying, so to say, or making artworks disappear. And maybe also, take them away from the art market. So what do you think could such an exhibition, which is an exhibition without an audience in a way, at least beside the metropolis, the art metropolis, and then an exhibition that tries to undermine the very strong relation or the very strong impact of the art market in the art world. So what do you think is groundbreaking or could be groundbreaking and also be a model for other exhibitions?
It's a difficult question, but first I have problems when you say the art world. What is the art world? There's much more than one art world. Of course, we have this art world with the art fairs and the gallery and so on, but we also have the art world with off spaces and with little places where the artists run spaces and so on. We have the art world that is run by activists and so on. And if you compare it to the art world of the activists, we are quite conventional. So I don't know. Of course, we want to make a gesture and we want to say we can't continue like this. Also in the artwork, we can't continue like this. But that's it. And it's interesting thing that we have both. In a way, we are really conventional. We have more or less professional artists. We have artworks, objects, commodities in a way. We have this genre of in situ, land art, if you would like to call it like this. On the other hand, we have, as you said, no spectators, the art objects will disappear and so on. So we have both. And so it's a kind of, as nowadays you say, it's a hybrid, the exhibition.
And do you think it the project fails in some aspects?
I don't, what do you mean with failed?
Your own feelings about it, just your own feelings.
For that it needs more time because it just opened 1 week ago and it was so long it was unclear if it really will happen or not because of Corona, because of the there's no all this. Well, but in a way it works, of course. In a way it's a strong gesture and we made this gesture together with Apex Art and it's nice. And it makes no sense to think if you fail or not. We are not make sports. You don't win or lose.
I often feel like failing. Okay.
I think to close with a personal note. Actually, for me, the exhibition succeeded at that moment when my niece, my 12-year-old godchild, wrote me a personal note and told me she's very proud of me, that also that like the elder generation, for her, you belong to the elder generation, is really taking note now and is really like, not only choosing topics in the art world about some aesthetic problem, but really, speak also to the younger generation now. And I think that was a good moment for me that illustrated to me that it is succeeding.
Yeah. Abby, you want to take over for the open discussion?
Sure, yes. And
Great.
Andreas, thank you for sharing that. That's really beautiful. I think, you know, there's a lot of pressure on the younger generation, like you say, and I'm glad they're taking note and that she shared that with you.